The rain had been drumming against the floor-to-ceiling windows of our apartment for 3 hours, a relentless, soothing soundtrack to the quiet destruction of my life. I was sitting at the kitchen island, staring at a lukewarm cup of black coffee when Maya said it. She didn't drop her voice. She didn't look guilty or hesitant. She just smoothed the front of her linen trousers, adjusted the heavy diamond engagement ring I had put on her finger 6 months ago, and said it like she was suggesting a different brand of oat milk. "I think we should open things up, Elle." I blinked, my chest tightening. "What?" "An open relationship," Maya said, taking a delicate sip from her glass of wine. "We've been together for 5 years, Elena. We got engaged so young. I love you. You know I do. But I feel like we're settling into this comfortable, domestic routine before we've even explored everything life has to offer. It doesn't mean I don't want to marry you. It just means I want us both to have the freedom to experience passion without the weight of forever attached to it." "Freedom," I repeated, the word tasting like ash. "Maya, we're planning a wedding for next October." "And we still will." She smiled, reaching across the marble counter to cover my hand. Her skin was warm, familiar, and suddenly felt entirely alien. "It's modern, Elle. It's healthy. Honestly, I've already met someone. Just casually. A girl from the new design firm. It made me realize how much energy it brings back into my life. I want that for you too. She's already seeing someone." The realization hit me like a physical blow, knocking the air straight out of my lungs. She hadn't come to me with a boundary or a shared fantasy. She had come to me with a cover story for emotional infidelity. She wanted my permission to cheat, so she wouldn't have to bear the guilt. "You're serious," I whispered. "I am," Maya said softly, leaning in to kiss my cheek. The faint scent of her luxury perfume made my stomach turn. "Think about it. Don't be so rigid, baby. It's just body heat. At the end of the day, I'm coming home to you." She walked into our bedroom, leaving me alone in the dark kitchen. My heart wasn't just breaking. It was hardening into something cold, jagged, and dangerous. 2 days later, the annual summer gallery showcase arrived. It was Maya's big night. She was managing the PR for the headline exhibit, and I was supposed to play the supportive fiancé. I wore a tailored black suit, my hair pinned back, looking every bit the composed, dutiful partner. Maya was in her element, flitting between art collectors and executives, her laughter ringing across the echoing gallery. And right by her side, as she had been for the past 8 years, was Julian. Julian was Maya's best friend. Where Maya was sharp edges, bright lights, and performance, Julian was quiet depth. She was a dark-haired sculptor with steady, calloused hands, piercing green eyes, and a quiet intensity that usually made people nervous. Julian had always been the anchor in Maya's chaotic orbit. And for 5 years, Julian had treated me with a gentle, guarded respect that I had never quite known how to classify. I was standing by the bar, watching Maya whisper something into the ear of a tall, blonde woman, the casual girl from the design firm, no doubt, when a quiet voice spoke beside me. "You look like you're miles away, Elena." I turned. Julian was standing there, holding 2 glasses of sparkling water. She looked stunning in a deep emerald velvet blazer, her dark hair falling in soft waves around her collarbones. "Just thinking," I said, offering a tight, empty smile. Julian's green eyes narrowed slightly. She didn't buy it. She never did. "Maya told me about the agreement," she said, her voice dropping to a low murmur so it wouldn't carry over the ambient lounge music. My breath caught. "She told you." "She brags when she thinks she's being revolutionary," Julian said, a bitter edge lacing her tone. She looked across the room at Maya, who was currently laughing at something the blonde girl said, leaning in just a little too close. Julian's jaw clenched. "She's an idiot, Elena. She has no idea what she's throwing away." "She thinks it's healthy," I murmured, taking a sip of water just to keep my hands from shaking. "She thinks body heat doesn't mean anything." Julian turned her full attention back to me. The intensity in her gaze was suffocating, thick with a tension that had been silently building between us for years under the guise of friendship. "Body heat without heart is cheap," Julian whispered, stepping closer. The faint scent of sandalwood and cedar enveloped me. "If someone had you, if someone was allowed to hold you, to promise forever to you, throwing that open to strangers is an insult." My breath hitched. At Julian. "She doesn't deserve you," Julian said, her voice steady, dangerous, and completely sincere. "She never did." Revenge is a strange, intoxicating fire. It starts as a spark of pure anger, but as I looked at Julian, at the raw, undisguised longing in her eyes that had clearly been buried for years, the anger shifted into something else. Something heavy, electric, and terrifying. "Maya wants an open relationship," I said, my voice barely audible above the music. Those were her rules. Julian swallowed hard, her pulse ticking visibly in her throat. "Elena, if we cross this line, there is no going back for any of us." "Good," I said. "I don't want to go back." An hour later, we were in Julian's apartment. It was a loft space filled with unfinished stone sculptures, the smell of clay, wet paint, and rich wood. It was raw, honest, and entirely unlike the pristine, curated apartment I shared with Maya. The moment the front door clicked shut behind us, the tension snapped. I didn't plan it. I thought I was doing this out of spite, out of a desperate need to hurt Maya the way she had hurt me. But the second Julian's hands touched my waist, pulling me against her, the spite vanished, replaced by an overwhelming wave of pure, unfiltered desire. Julian didn't touch me like a casual fling. She touched me like someone who had been starving and had finally been handed a feast. Her hands were warm and firm, sliding up my back, cupping the nape of my neck as her lips met mine. The kiss was deep, aching, and furious. I gasped into her mouth, my fingers tangling in her dark hair, pulling her closer until there was no air left between us. "Elena!" Julian breathed against my lips, her hands trembling slightly against my face. "Tell me to stop if this is just about her, please. Because if I touch you the way I've wanted to touch you for 5 years, I won't be able to pretend it was nothing." My heart hammered against my ribs. The confession hung in the quiet loft, heavy and undeniable. She hadn't just stepped into this for the drama. She had been in love with me from the shadows while watching her best friend take me for granted. "Don't stop," I whispered, reaching down to undo the buttons of her emerald blazer. "Don't you dare stop." What followed was not a frantic, vengeful mistake. It was slow, agonizingly tender, and fiercely romantic. Julian carried me to her bed, her eyes never leaving mine. Every touch was intentional. When her mouth traced the curve of my collarbone, down to the slope of my breast, a soft sob escaped my throat, not of sadness, but of the overwhelming shock of being handled with such reverence. Where Maya had grown comfortable and careless, Julian was deliberate. She mapped every inch of my skin with her lips and fingers, learning what made me shiver, what made me arch into her touch, what made me whisper her name into the quiet dark of the room. When she slid inside me, her chest pressed against mine, skin to skin, heart to heart, I broke open completely. It wasn't just physical, it was an emotional undoing. I held onto her shoulders, my eyes locked on hers, drowning in the depth of green eyes that saw every piece of my broken pride and put it back together with fire. We moved together until the world outside the loft shrank to nothing but the sound of our tangled breath and the frantic beat of our meeting hearts. When it was over, I lay tangled in her white sheets, my head resting on Julian's bare chest. Her hand was slowly tracing circles on my shoulder, her chin resting on my hair. "What happens now?" Julian asked softly, her voice thick with emotion. I looked at the bedside clock. It was 2:00 a.m. "Now," I said, sitting up and looking at her, "I go home." The apartment was dark when I unlocked the front door. Maya was sitting on the couch, the TV playing silently in the background, casting a pale blue light across her face. She looked up the second I walked in, her eyebrows knitting together. "Where were you?" Maya asked, her voice sharp with an edge I hadn't heard in years. "The gallery closed at 11. I looked for you everywhere. I was worried sick, Elena." I slowly took off my coat, hanging it up in the closet. I felt entirely different. The ghost of Julian's touch was still warm on my skin, her scent lingering softly in my hair. I felt powerful, grounded and utterly cold toward the woman standing before me. "I was out," I said simply, walking toward the bedroom. Maya stood up, crossing the living room to intercept me. "Out where? With who?" "You didn't answer your phone." I stopped and looked at her. Really looked at her. The fiancé who thought she could keep me on a shelf while she sampled the rest of the world. "I was putting your advice into practice," I said calmly. Maya froze. The color drained from her face, her eyes widening in disbelief. "What?" "You said we should open things up," I said, my tone as smooth as glass. "You said I was too rigid. You said it was just body heat, and that at the end of the day, we come home to each other. So I took your advice." "Elena." "No," Maya stammered, stepping closer, her hands shaking slightly. You slept with someone. Who? Who was it?" I reached up, unlatching the delicate silver chain around my neck, the one matching the ring on my finger, and set it gently on the coffee table. "Julian," I said. The silence that followed was deafening. Maya looked as though I had physically struck her. She staggered back a half step, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Julian, my best friend. You said it didn't matter, I reminded her softly. You said love and passion were separate. Isn't this what you wanted, Maya? Freedom. Not with her. Maya screamed, tears suddenly spilling over her eyes, breaking through her polished facade. Not with my best friend. How could you do this to me? How could she do this to me? Because she sees me, I said, stepping past her toward the bedroom to pack a bag. Which is something you stopped doing a long time ago. Elena, wait, please. Maya rushed after me, grabbing my arm, her voice cracking with pure, desperate panic. Tears were streaming down her face, ruining her makeup. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I don't want an open relationship. I don't want anyone else. It was a mistake, a stupid, arrogant mistake. I only want you, Elle. Please look at me. She dropped to her knees right there by the bed, weeping openly, clutching at the hem of my shirt. The regret in her eyes was absolute, raw, and agonizing. She had thought she held all the power, thought she could play with my heart without consequence. Now, faced with the reality of losing me forever, and losing her best friend in the process, she was crumbling. I looked down at her. A week ago, seeing Maya cry like this would have broken my heart. Now, it just felt like the natural end of a story that had run its course. I'm sorry too, Maya, I said softly, gently pulling my shirt from her grip. But you opened the door. And I walked through it. I packed one suitcase with my essentials. I left the engagement ring sitting next to the silver necklace on the coffee table. Maya was still sitting on the floor of the living room, quietly sobbing into her hands as I pulled my bag out the front door and closed it behind me for the last time. The morning air outside was crisp and clear, washed clean by the night's rain. I caught a cab and gave the driver an address I knew by heart now. When I knocked on the door of the loft, it opened almost instantly. Julian stood there, wearing a soft gray sweater, her hair tied back loosely. She looked at the suitcase in my hand, then up at my face. She knows, I said. Julian took a slow breath, stepping aside to let me in. Are you okay? I think. For the first time in a very long time, I actually am, I replied, setting the suitcase down. Julian closed the door and turned to me. She didn't ask if I was going to go back. She didn't ask if I regretted it. She just walked over, took my face in her warm, calloused hands, and pressed a tender, lingering kiss to my forehead. You have a place here, Julian murmured against my skin, her arms wrapping securely around my waist. For as long as you need. Or for as long as you want. I leaned into her warmth, closing my eyes as the tension finally drained from my shoulders. The revenge was over, the anger was gone, but as I looked at Julian, I realized the romance was just beginning.